I can only say what the data shows, and as well as what I see in clinic and folks talk about. But and yeah, I mean, I'll hold off on that. But what I tell folks all the time is, look, this is what the data shows. As
Yeah.
example, and I'll say this when you ask the question is, yeah, these weight ball programs, they work. Velocity programs, they absolutely work. And your kid is going to likely be more successful, and it'll come with a 25% chance of having an injury. Like,
Yep.
really? I'm like, yeah. I mean, worst case scenario, you have bad elbow, bad shoulder. This is not cancer. This is not your heart. It's not your brain. But for a kid or a teenager, baseball or softball, if you're out for the year, it's your livelihood. To
Yeah.
them, it's their life. So again, I'm not saving lives here with this. This is more preventative. I'm not an oncologist. I'm not a transplant surgeon.
Yeah.
But I went through this stuff. You went through this stuff. I mean, I had a partial tear of my UCL when I was in college as a catcher. Um,
Hmm.
Shoulder hurts from time to time, that sort of thing. My favorite players watching, were the guys that just went about their business. Cal Ripken was one of my favorite players, Ryan Sandberg. And then when I was in Boston, Jason Varitek. I mean, Varitek just didn't talk, but you did not want to get in his way. And you saw what happened when he lifted A-Rod up. I mean, I love Varitek. So,
Yeah, I actually got to see at FSU. His little brother came to FSU when we had those big combines, those big camps, and I was working that obviously, and met Jason actually. And I worked for Seattle, and we were trying to get Jason squared away. And in those discussions, I didn't have any contact with him, but I met him. He was just out of college, and I saw him play in college,
oh
which that
yeah, I
was
mean,
Nomar and him and
and
Peyton. And
Jay
dude,
Payton, I got to Emory. So, for Emory being a Division III school, we had really nice resources at Emory, but we didn't have like what Georgia Tech did.
right.
So we would play our 4 p.m. games, and if it's a Friday or a doubleheader on Saturday, and those of us, especially those of us that have girlfriends, were like, well, heck, let's go shower and then go over to Tech, and we watch. I missed the '94 team by 1 year, so that was Veritek, Payton, and Garcia Parra. But I got to see JD Drew play when FSU came and played Tech. The guy who replaced Veritek, Tucker Barr, who I don't know if he made it beyond double or triple A, but he was the catcher for Tech and their closer.
Mhm.
I mean, he threw 90 miles an hour to second base. So you can imagine. So he was their closer. I mean, it was at the time, it was like $2 to go see Georgia Tech play. And you're basically watching a double A team. And now for me, with what I have my work and stuff I do with Team USA and US soccer and stuff, but every now and then I'll try to catch out a Gators game. And it's basically watching a double A team.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Isn't that interesting? Tucker's from Tallahassee. So I've known
Oh,
Tucker and
okay.
his brother his whole life, and I was a catcher. So in
Yeah.
Tallahassee, that's the surrounding area. Those guys would gravitate toward me when I was a coaching. So, I had, Tucker Barr, and his brother was a little bit more of an outfielder kind of role player guy, ended up doing great stuff. But yeah, Tucker was pretty amazing
He had a
coming out of
gun.
high
I
school.
just
It was
remember,
unfair at a 1A school.
I think I was a sophomore first time I saw him play, so I think he's a year behind me,
Yeah.
maybe. So I graduated college in '98. But man, he had a hose.
Yeah, it was you talk about, yeah, I coach this guy, coach that guy. We just stay out of their way, man. You know the deal. You just stay out of talent's way. A tweak here, a tweak there, and generally it's just trying to keep them progressing, keep them moving. But
Yeah.
let's talk about you for a second here. You sent me your CV, and I'm going to read this to you. This is quite impressive. So your name is Dr. Jason Zaremski, correct?
Zaremski.
Zaremski, sorry. You're an MD. You're okay, I'm just going to read it. American College of Sports Medicine fellow, American Academy of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation a fellow, and also a fellow with the Medical Society of Sports Medicine. You were also named Chief Medical Officer in 22 of the U18 Baseball World Cup, as well as the Softball Confederation. And you're the director, which we're going to dive into this right now, the director of the UF Health Throwing Clinic. Tell
Correct.
me about that. What is that?
So, with my passion for throwing and having gone through throwing injuries in my career, I've always been interested in why do kids get injured beyond just overuse. And I've been fortunate to have some really nice mentors and sponsors over my career from the research side, from the non-operative side, from the surgical side, from the, and they all kind of come together. And finally, I wanted to kind of develop this throwing clinic. And it's not a traditional throwing clinic when you think of, oh, okay, everyone that I see on a Monday are throwers. It's just not how it works. We have a lot of great sports medicine physicians at UF, and we all see throwers. But it kind of is something I developed in terms of it's wherever I go. If it's in clinic, we can talk about prevention beyond just me assessing you for injury or telling you what your injury is. If it's research that I'll do in conjunction with colleagues, either at UF or colleagues I have around the country. If it's outreach, stuff like we're doing now, it's all these different things to kind of grow awareness from a grassroots approach to trying to get the message out there more and more beyond the traditional well-known sports medicine throwing experts, whether it's some of the surgeons. You've heard of surgeons such as, Dr. Andrews, kind of the godfather of baseball and sports medicine, but
Yeah.
folks like
Joe
Chris
before that.
Ahmad, Chris Camp, folks
Yep.
like that. And then on the physical therapy side, Kevin Wilk,
Mhm.
Mike Reinhold. So these are folks that people know. They're familiar with Major League Baseball. I'd love to help with MLB. But right now, I really focus on the adolescent and high school level. And that's really what my research has been in for years. And this is just trying to kind of condense everything into one area, but it's really in a way and an approach to get the word out more beyond kind of the grassroots approach that we all have probably done at some point earlier in our careers, so that we can say, okay, well, if this is working, let's continue to do this, and if this is not working, what are ways to improve or prevent injury in our athletes? And the challenge has been the last couple of years, and with the growth of social media and word of mouth, is evidence doesn't seem to come into play as much as, oh, this pro athlete does this, so it must work,
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
this group does this and a bunch of guys increase their velocity 8 miles per hour in 8 to 12 weeks, so it must work. Okay, it does, but what are the long-term ramifications of that? So that's really has been my goal, and I've been fortunate to work with, a lot of colleagues on the baseball and now on the softball side as well, because I want to make sure the girls are getting just as much support as the boys are at the adolescent and high school levels. Because once you get into college, especially Division I and up, there's plenty of resources,
Yeah.
but it's that high school and below level that we need to continue to do a better job because I mean, if you look at the numbers, just look at the straight up number of epidemiology of throwing injuries, taking into account the growth and participation, numbers aren't going down. Numbers are going up. So that tells me two things. One, there's probably more participation, which is fantastic, at least in the United States. But that also tells me with all the data, all the research, everything we're doing doesn't seem to matter. So we're missing something.
No, and that's really interesting that you bring that up, and I want to touch on a couple of things that you said right there. The internet is a wonderful, wonderful tool, but if you type in throwing mechanics, you'll get a million hits on that. So as a parent and as a kid in that adolescent arena, which you'll have the numbers on this. Doctor, we mentioned not Doctor Jordan, Doctor Andrews mentioned this almost a couple of decades ago through his clinic that the number of adolescent and teens that are getting catastrophic reconstructive surgeries in those clinics has now replaced his big league guys and his other guys. It's the largest growing population. And you can say, like, okay, well, it's the largest population. But it wasn't like that 30 years ago. It wasn't like that when you and I are playing. It wasn't like that for the last 100 years. So, yes, something is definitely changing. And if parents go to look at things, it is unbelievable because this guy says you should be doing this. And then this guy says, never do that. You need to do this. And then in the background, you got a big leaguer who does something completely different.
Yeah.
So, again, I want to thank you for sitting down because what we want to do is kind of distill this down with the programs that you run and the programs that I run to be able to come to, like, okay, look, what works? We need to get what works. You're 6'6", you're 5'6". It's going to work differently. The mechanics don't apply the same. Whether you're a catcher or you're a softball throwing outfielder, you got to find out what's going to work and work individually. The kid, and you're right, we're definitely missing some things because the injuries, they're not going down.
No.
No.
And when you look at certain things, I think that are they're different. You sort of allude to it, going, when did this advent of these more severe injuries, especially like the UCL injuries or the Tommy John ligament injuries start to go up. And if you look at the data, they really started to go up in the 90s. I
Right.
was a kid, I was a high school kid and a college kid in the 90s, 90, 94, 94, 98. And the question is, well, what happened then? Can't prove it, but what I can tell you is this. One, advent of kind of these classic clinics, these um, weekend tournaments, the travel ball phenomenon just exploded in the 90s. That's number one. Number two, our kids are bigger, faster, and stronger because we know how to train better.
Mhm.
Okay. So you're throwing harder. Then you add on year-round play, whether it is outdoors in the South or West Coast, whether it's through indoor facilities, a little more, depending where you are up in the North, at least in the States. Then you add on, okay, well, we're taking that into account. How do we manage someone's workload? And we can get in deep in the weeds about workload, but how do we manage someone's workload? And then the last part are these weighted ball velocity programs where these programs work. But what I mean by that is your velocity increases. If your velocity increases, your spin rate most likely is going to go up. Well, if velocity and spin rate go up, and you have good control, you're going to be a bonus baby. You're going to be a first rounder.
Right.
If you don't have good control, pitching coaches can teach you control. You can't teach speed.
Right.
But the problem becomes, and my wife hates it when I use the saying, but you can't put the horse back in the barn. If
Right.
you're throwing harder and you have a higher spin rate, and scouts know that that leads to greater success, particularly in baseball pitchers, why would you not do that? Because you have an opportunity to be more successful, make the team, get the scholarship, get drafted, play for the Olympic team, whatever. So I get it. But it comes with a risk. It comes with, depending on which data set you look at, about 25 up to 25% risk of throwing related injury. That's in a season. We're not even talking about the cumulative nature of things where, okay, as an eighth grader, I sprained my elbow, and as a sophomore, I have a low grade partial tear. Now, when I'm a junior or senior and I've gone through puberty and skeletal maturation, and I'm a lot bigger and stronger, now I've gone from throwing 72 to maybe 84. Oh, but by the way, I already have wear and tear of that ligament. It may pop when I'm a junior or senior. That wasn't happening in the 80s and 90s. And remember, even though I'm not a surgeon, the intent of the surgery was to prolong a professional career,
Right. Right. The
right?
original, correct. The Tommy John of the rotator complex was to give him 4 or 5 more years.
Yeah, it was the John Smoltz is the perfect example. He
Right.
was, I can't remember his exact age, was he 32 or 30 or something like that?
Mhm.
And then guy's career extended. It was not 15 to 19-year-olds having UCL either repair now or reconstruction, because these reconstructions or repairs are not intended to last 10, 20 years, which if you're 15 and hoping to get an opportunity to play pro ball and even at the show, that's what you're going to need.
Yeah.
They were hoping to last 5 to 7 years, 6 to 8 years. So the other thing that is interesting is you look at the re-injury rate after you've had a primary reconstruction. Now, again, some of the data is now because there's more and more repairs. You heard about this with some of the NFL quarterbacks, which is a little bit different. But I mean, I can't remember the most recent data, but something like 1 in 3 or 35% of all professional baseball pitchers at one time have had some form of UCL surgical intervention. And
Right.
now it's gone to the point where, at least at the professional level, it's like, oh, okay, you're out for the year, next man up. No big
Right.
deal. Our surgeons are great. The surgical reconstruction techniques and the surgeons that are doing this are amazing. But the key is we don't want you to have surgery. I mean, we don't want you to miss a year or go through the struggles that you're going to have. And remember, just because you have surgery doesn't mean you're back to exactly 100% what you were before.
No, and having had some surgery for my shoulder, I can say this: it's not the same. It's different, and it feels different. The way I throw is slightly different. There's subtle differences. People get a misconception, especially when they're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. They're thinking, okay, we'll just be back to normal. It will never be that again. It will be slightly different. And that rehab for me was incredibly frustrating because it took a long time, obviously. But it's like it's not the same anymore. I have to I can't lift the same. It's a little bit different. My warm-ups are different now. That Superman S has now been removed, and now
Yeah.
you're mortal. That's the
Yeah.
first kind of thing. And we talk to guys all the time about this. If you want speed, cool, not a problem. And these velocity gyms and these velocity mills, we won't name names or anything like that. What they're saying, and I took biomechanics in college and grad level kinesiology, and I hear what they're saying, and it's correct. But my whole thing is, what's the cost? Because anybody that knows anything about speed, whether it's getting a rocket off the planet, going down a racetrack, or throwing 100 miles an hour, there is a toll that you must pay for speed. You just have to. So, to your point, that injury rate really kind of grows. And when I was scouting back in the 90s, we said just what you were saying. Give me a stallion, and I can teach the stallion how to run. Give me somebody that can throw hard. I'll teach him how to pitch. We can put control on him. We can't do it the other way around. And plus in the big leagues, we don't have time. In college,
Yeah.
you got 5 years to
And
play
what's
four.
funny is,
Right. If you're not moving up in 4 or 5 years, they're moving you out. So, you don't have time.
well, what's funny is now, would you think Greg Maddux, if he were drafted today, would he be successful?
I think he would
I
dominate.
mean,
And wait,
so he was hitting,
90 to 91 with the occasional reach up to 93, right? Right in there. And now I'm switching to the hitters. And we're going to talk about
yeah,
throwing most of the time. Now I'm switching
sure,
over
sure.
to hitters, okay? Right now, one of the things in which is my dominion a great deal is hitting past mechanics. It's super easy to teach swing mechanics. It's very hard to teach hitting. They're not the same. Every successful hitter knows how to swing a bat, but not everybody that can swing the bat can be a successful hitter. Those are different. It is much more mental and taking an approach into an at bat, looking at a pitcher, going, what's next, finding those tips and tells and things like that. From just a physical point of view for Greg Maddux, I'm 100% agreeing with you. He does not match up. But from a cerebral point, the hitters that
Oh,
I
yeah.
see in the big leagues, they're not bringing approaches into the bat because it's changed. The game looks more to me at the big league level now like when we ran a combine. You're
Yep.
looking for one guy to hit a bomb. You're looking for another guy to throw 100. Oh, we got one. Okay, now what? Oh, we got the excitement and the build and how baseball moves that you and I are used to is kind of set to the side. So these guys are looking to launch, and you start talking about hitting, and it's like, God, did nobody teach you this? Did we swing
I mean,
shape?
I gotta tell you, I mean, I grew up huge Cubs fan, huge Red Sox fan, and not because I happen to live in a college town, but it's so much more fun to go watch a college game, whether it's the Gators or another team, but watching college ball because not everyone's throwing 100 for 3 or 4 innings. Then you bring in the next guy throwing 100, and you hope there's 1 or 2 home runs. I mean, you have the loom and bath factor, but these guys are all running hard. They're all trying to go the opposite field. They're all and hitting left field, left center to right center. It's a lot more fun to watch than at times, quite honestly, if I put on a game like ESPN or Fox Sports or something, watching Cubs, Red Sox, Yankees, Braves. It's fine, but it gets a little boring compared to the college game.
I completely agree for those very reasons, and I think, and we won't harp on this, but I was on with a friend of mine who I coached with years ago talking about it. I think the big leagues they've lost their avatar. They lost why we watch sports, and it's a story. It's a story arc. You've got the first few innings as the introduction, and you have moments in there that are ebbs and flows, and he gets on, and he steals a base and a pass, and then the middle, like any story arc in a movie, it all goes to hell. It all, and that's in the middle, and the guy finds Yoda or whatever, and then at the end, and again you're having these little story bumps to keep it interesting. It all comes into a crescendo type of moment, and it builds over time. And now it's become watching practice essentially for me. And okay, I'll go to the Rays and I go to games and things. It's just different, and I agree with you 100%. I'd go to UF game any day of the week. Go to watch. Link and I have known each other for decades at FSU. So much more interesting, nuanced that is there in the college game. It's just, I think it's better.
Yeah. I was watching I think it was last year. It was Carolina's or UNC. Carolina was playing Duke, and it was just so much fun to. It was on TV, but I mean, it was so much fun to just watch the game, and the crowd was into it the whole time. And obviously you have the rivalry because they're only a couple miles away, but it was much better than watching a Braves Marlins game, quite honestly.
Yeah, and now
You
that
know?
they've taken it down to 20 rounds in the draft, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And coincidentally, you remember how we got throttled by the 11.7 rule, the 11.7 scholarships over our roster. That has now been released. Now you can have a full roster complement. So I think it's going to be better and better. And look, brother, the last two College World Series were flipping awesome. What
Oh
fantastic
yeah,
tournaments. Unbelievably good stuff there. Well,
yeah.
I want to throw a little something out at you here. I pulled this, and we're going to go a little bit back to the data. Since this is right
Okay.
out of AP News, 2003 article, AP News, and this is the MLB study. So
Mhm.
they did their own internal study. Since 2005, pitching injuries have increased 128.77%. So in the last decade,
Mhm.
we've had 128.77%. There's another report, the number of players drafted in the first 10 rounds who have already undergone intervention, Tommy John surgery being one of them, jumped from 3 in 2011 to 23. That's a 667% increase. One more stat, and this is where is it here? Fastball velocities have gone from 91 to 94. Now that doesn't sound much. That doesn't sound like much to a parent. You and I know that's a massive leap in an average fastball. That is a huge leap because
Oh
as
yeah.
a hitter, I could get it to 91. They start tickling up 94. It starts disappearing on me, brother. I got it. And I was a catcher like you, man. I could hit a little bit, but goodness.
Well, it's funny you mentioned. Yeah, you mentioned that. So I looked at some data. I actually presented this in Japan. It's one of the offshoot of MLB websites. Is since 2017, they've tracked every pitch velocity that's been thrown in a major league game. And from 2017 through 2024, and obviously there's a little blip in 2020.
Yeah.
I looked at the number of pitchers who threw at least who threw at least 100 pitches that year. What percent threw 95 or more, and what percent threw 98 or more? And it was something like it's gone from I think 20% to almost 33% is throwing 95 or more. And 98 or more, it's gone from like 1.2% to I think a high of somewhere around 5%, 4%, which again, that may not sound like a lot, but that means 1 in 3 pitchers at the major league level is throwing 95. And you've tripled the amount of pitchers that can throw 98. It used to be in the last 20 years, you had Aroldis Chapman,
Yep.
and that's about it. For
Right.
triple. And now you've got Aroldis Chapman. You've got the guy that keep forgetting that pitch for Tennessee that's in the Angel system that hit 105. But you've got a ton of guys now. The average pitcher is if the average pitcher is 94 and it's probably going to be closer to 95 now. That used to be in the 80s and 90s, your closer at the major
Yes.
league level. I
Yes.
mean, I can tell
Yes.
you when I watch UF on TV, which I realize SEC school, big time D1, but there's about 20 or 30 of those schools. 3, 4, 5 of those pitchers, almost all of them are probably throwing over 91, 92, and probably a few of them more than that.
Well,
So,
Jack, the first baseman hybrid. I mean, he was,
oh,
and well, and the other thing too, that's God gave him a lot of that. Okay, there's only so much you and I can do, and only so much Sully can do, but God gave him something to work with,
well,
certainly. But I agree.
oh yeah, and I'm not involved in this care. I was just would watch him as a fan. But remember, why didn't he play his freshman year? Why did he get to
Sure.
the Gators? He had a
Sure.
Tommy John right at the end of his senior year, or I think it was somewhere in his senior year of high school. He would have
Right.
gone right to the pros otherwise. So, and obviously him playing first base, I think first base DH, whatever, what the Royals are doing is going to be great because he could throw 99. His control was a little iffy, but yeah, I mean I mean I watched batting practice and you're like he's hitting 500 feet consistently.
Yeah. No, he was. If you had to build one out of clay, it's going to look like him, and if you had to build a pitcher, it's going to look like Skeens.
Oh yeah,
That 6'6" upside down triangle, wide shoulder, fast guy. I mean, that's a lot to work with, and it's good that those guys are workosauruses and they get it, and they really understand what they're doing. But more and more, and we're going to go back to this, the data that you were talking about, that you were talking about the Japanese leagues, or were you talking about the American leagues when you were saying the data?
Well, no, when I was in Japan, it was very interesting, and we can talk about this a little bit with like the Nippon League. So, the Nippon Baseball League is analogous to Major League Baseball here. So,
Yeah,
Ichiro just got into the Hall of Fame. He came from the Oryx Buffaloes. I got to see their kind of their behind the scenes stuff there. That's their, I mean, where Otani came from, or Sasaki came from, and is going to now with the Dodgers. They all came from the Nippon League. That's their major leagues over in Japan. And what's interesting, and I've been talking to a bunch of colleagues I met there, every time I asked about weighted ball velocity programs in general, they were like, what are you talking about? Now, these are the physicians, these aren't the athletic trainers or the physios. And I'm sure some of the athletes are aware of it, but over here, I mean, all the docs, we all know about it. If you take care of throwing athletes, you're aware of it. None of them were aware of it. So we're in the early process of trying to start a study to get to gauge interest about what are athletes at what would be considered the high school level over there aware of velocity programs. And if you're not aware of it, asking questions like, as an example, would you want to do this program if it increased your velocity 10%, but you had a 25% risk of injury? That's basically what it is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the cost? Speed has a toll. What's the cost?
And there's a cultural and historical difference. In the US, it's faster, 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 bigger, faster, stronger.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate this, and I got a tiny little taste when I was over there for a week and a half, is the respect all the players have for the coaches, for the doctors, I mean, everyone. They're like bowing and yes, sir, yes, yes, ma'am. It's really quite refreshing. It's a little bit different here sometimes, I'll say.
Yeah, I
So,
agree. Yeah.
yeah,
And it is interesting. It's such a cultural thing that's so ingrained with those players. And that extends to, and the Koreans and Taiwanese and all
absolutely.
those guys.
Yeah,
It's really interesting how they do that. It's such an ingrained cultural kind of thing.
yeah.
They don't have football, they don't have basketball. So this is kind of the
They,
deal.
yeah, they're sports that are their pastimes are baseball. I think they said volleyball, and I think soccer, but soccer might be a distant second or third. But yeah,
Yeah.
baseball by far and away. Like apparently, it was a national announcement when Ichiro got in because it was what after 6 p.m. our time last night. It was 8 a.m. the next day in Tokyo. So apparently, it was a huge announcement throughout the country.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, he's a hero on a couple of different
Oh
continents,
yeah. Oh,
certainly
absolutely.
here.
Yeah.
And, from a hitter's perspective, I mean, he was just great to watch and what he could do. And it's hard to, well, you don't teach what he does. He does what he does. That's not
Oh yeah.
something, you would really talk to guys about. But so let's talk about it and what we do. And we've talked a little bit about this and the programs that I have here. This is a year-round thing now. And I'm okay with year-round baseball. The reason is this. Some of our guys, many of our guys that I work with, aren't really football guys, and they're not basketball guys. So it's baseball, and we play it pretty much year-round. Now, that's the triangle. And then we did this, you and I did this in college. You had the fall ball, which is a version of, and we called August, when I coached in college, we called August tendonitis month. So we get all those guys in from the summer in those laxed summer leagues, whether that be Cape Cod. And Cape Cod's a good league, don't get me wrong. It's a premier league, but the structure has been taken away. And they're all coming in laboring, and we get new guys and all that. And then we go to the competitive season through the spring, and then we get back into summer again. Well, that's now very much at the high school level and the travel ball. And you mentioned that there could be, there may be, it looks like in the 90s where the travel ball, the current iteration of travel ball and injuries almost start to kind of parallel each other. And this is one thing I'm putting on a workshop here actually this coming Sunday with a physical therapist. And we that's one of the things that we talk about is, where are you going to limit your exposure? Where is your arm going to get a break? Where are you going to take the time to recover? Because I don't see a great deal of recovery methodology going on in the high school level down here. How important through these seasons is ice, contrasting therapy, synergy, yoga, all of this recovery practices?
I think, whatever modality is chosen, I think the overarching theme is you can't throw 11 months a year when you're a teenager or younger. And, some
Okay,
of
now you're
the,
going to ask why.
yeah, I know. I'm getting
Why?
there. Yeah. So number one, well, not number one, but one of the other concepts to keep in mind, at least in the region I'm in, is high school ball seems to be fading and travel ball team has more control. The high school team is considered the warm-up period, depending on what sort of structured travel program you're in and how competitive it is. So it's a very interesting approach. But if that's the case, well, let's just play it out in Florida. And we're not even in Miami. We're in the northern part of Florida, right?
Yep.
So high school season, FHSAA starts the last week in January, and now they give you 4 weeks for the pitchers to kind of ramp their arms up. So you're basically starting January 1st. High school baseball starts around Valentine's Day in terms of games. Season goes till May 1st, and if your team's any good, you go into May. You might get 2, 3 weeks off, and then you basically go into travel ball. That's Mayish until October or November. And oh, by the way, you have the weekend, clinics, classics, showcases, whatever you want to call it. So you basically have December if you're lucky, or Thanksgiving to
Yeah.
January 1st if you're lucky. So the problem is you don't want to completely shut your body down. You want to have relative rest. Give your arm a break to rebuild your arm, whether that is throwers 10, tubing, weightlifting, yoga, whatever it is. And that's if you're healthy.
Right.
If you're not healthy, then that's a whole other, ball of wax. But to go back to, I'm gonna have a parent, I'm gonna have a coach, and when if someone says, well, I know what's going on, they could play all year round. Why? And I ask this all the time. The last time I remember Clayton Kershaw signed like a third of $1 billion contract. I'm like, why can Clayton Kershaw throw 7 to 8 months a year, but your 15-year-old has to throw 11 months a year? And
Right.
no one can answer that for me.
Right.
The other thing is until your child's bones have what we call ossified, their physis, their growth plate has solidified, which in boys, 16, 17, maybe, but
Mhm.
everyone's different. The growth plate is the weak link. You start doing all this overuse, you may not have a pop or anything there, where you have this chronic overuse that if you're doing the same thing for 10, 11 months a year from the ages of 9 or 10 until 15, 16, and then, depending on how successful you are, if you keep playing or not, your arm is going to break down.
Right. So you've got a predisposition, basically,
Correct.
and you don't even know you have one.
And what's tough is it's tough to tell parents or coaches when their son or daughter comes in and they have elbow tendonitis, they have shoulder tendonitis, they have biceps tendonitis, and like, okay, shut down for 2 weeks, then we're going to restart. You're like, oh, no big deal. But this starts building each year by the time they have gone through some skeletal maturation when they're in their mid to late high school years. And if they're successful and they're throwing harder, that's when they stop seeing me and they start to go to my surgical colleagues, so they've torn something. And it
Right.
didn't happen with just one throw. It happened with all of these throws where I don't know how good the training was. I don't know if the year-round training, if that was structured a little bit better. Um, I don't know if they tried playing different sports, which, I grew up in Chicago, my wife in Boston. Three-sport athletes were common, at least the high school level. I don't know if I've met any since I've been in Florida since 2012. It's usually football, baseball,
Right.
or football and track,
Right.
or
Yeah.
track to get back into shape for football. So maybe that's the way it is up north now. I don't know the answer to that. I don't want to pigeonhole Florida or Southern California or Texas or Louisiana in, but there's this whole concept of until you're really skeletally mature, you need to try different sports because it will make you more successful. There's all these kind of fancy terms called neuroplasticity and proprioception and balance and how do you see things in the air. Yeah, you learn how to throw, but maybe you want to switch, and if you want to do something that's completely different, try soccer. Give your arm a break. You definitely will be in shape. You
Right.
could be horrible at it. Just play for a season.
Right,
You know?
right. Yeah. And in the perfect world, in an ideal world, I think certainly that should be what we're doing, because when you and I look back, we didn't have all these problems. Our friends behind us and classmates, that way everybody played three sports. That's just kind of what you did. And then you found, okay, your junior, senior year, you're really a baseball guy, or you're a football guy, or whatever that may be. But there's a telltale sign where you're like, yeah, I'm an athlete. That's where I need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a colleague, a friend of mine who's at Emory who does a lot of research in this area. His name is Neeru Janthi. Dr. Janthi does a ton of this stuff, and there's others as well. And, basically, until you get to high school, you should be trying different sports. If
Mm-hmm.
you are, with a few rare exceptions like gymnastics or dance, that's a little different. But for the most part, that's what you should be doing. And if you get really good and focused by your freshman or sophomore year in high school and while focused on one sport, go for it. But,
Right.
when you're in that middle school and elementary school age group, you should be doing different things. It helps you develop those muscles, proprioception, balance, skill set. Because if you just focus on one thing, you'll get really good at that one thing. And then if you hurt yourself or you're not as successful to try to switch, it makes it really hard as well.
Oh, sure. Well, and you're hitting the brain from so many different areas, and that brain mapping those neural patterns, the locomotion.
Yeah.
And as a somebody who trained in this, you want that gross motor activity younger. Don't worry about the fine motor stuff. That's going to come as they get older. And we see this mistake in Little League parks where they're working very fine motor skill, very fine motor skill. Well, he's once that kid hits a growth spurt, well, that coordination is going to go over here and
Yeah.
he's going to stretch, and it's going to be different because his arms are literally in a different place 4 months from now.
Yeah.
But being able to play different sports, proprioception, meaning your body's awareness of where it is in space, and neuroplasticity is, correct me if I'm wrong, the brain's ability to neurally map and change coordinated behaviors and locomotion.
Yeah.
So trying out different sports just widens and broadens that gap, that development, and it's beneficial. I'm assuming when you're talking about your colleague who's doing this research, he's probably coming up with it's kind of beneficial for the holistic athlete. Like it'll pay off your junior, senior year.
Oh, yeah. And well, it's beneficial from a couple ways. One is you reduce the rate of burnout, you
Mm-hmm.
reduce the rate of psychological distress. I mean, because those two things are huge. You reduce the rate of cumulative chronic overuse injury.
Right.
And particularly with the younger kids, so like the pre-middle school age, you want them to be happy and healthy kids too.
Yeah.
The stress and the anxiety about being successful, not saying it's not going to be there, but that really shouldn't be there until at least your mid to late high school years. But that we know
Right.
that's not the case.
Yeah. When that's a typical time. Right.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned something earlier, and Dr. Jan, who's the physical therapist here that I work with, he talked about something, and let's ping back a little bit to travel ball. The injury and the travel ball thing seem to coincide. And before we go too much further, I am a fan of travel ball in some of what it does. Coming from where I came from down here in the beaches, it was Legion ball, which I'm assuming that was the same for you.
In Chicago, we had Legion Ball also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same kind of thing. It was very, very political, though. It was really tough, and you didn't have a lot of options. So I understand why travel ball is travel ball. And I also like the fact that you got a group of kids, they're kind of stay together, they know each other. Parents is it expensive? Incredibly expensive, unnecessarily expensive. But you're
Yeah.
out on the field, you're doing stuff. That is here. However, the scheduling of travel ball, especially for the younger kids, where we're going Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we're cramming all these games in, and Dr. Jan and I were just talking about this, they start splitting hairs on, okay, you're going to throw the first 3 innings, then you're going to go to right field to save your arm. And then the next day, you're going to throw 1 inning, and then you'll come back for the night game. Da, da, da. Well, by Sunday, all the players are hitting a fatigue band. They're hitting that upper gradient of fatigue. Even though they've conserved pitches, you still have to get 100% loose to play right field. You're still throwing balls around during the innings.
Oh, yeah.
Goodness gracious, we're throwing all the time. So when you hit that fatigue band in, and I'm probably using the wrong vernacular, but that fatigue threshold on the Sunday, now I'm muscling through for the $14 ring to get the championship. My mechanics typically are going to crap, and we have a little bit, we think, of an exposure there to those predispositions that you were just referring to in that weekend after weekend after weekend, game after game after game deal.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember this was the way the tournament was set up. There was something called the Firecracker Classic outside Detroit that the travel ball team that I was on when I was 12 was part of. And it was a huge tournament. It was like I don't know, 128 teams or something. And if you lost the first one, you have the two brackets, losers and winner bracket. But there was rain on the first day.
Yeah.
So what happened, and I was a catcher on that team at the time. So what happened was we lost our first game, won our next game, and then because of the way everything kind of kept pushing, it was a 3-day tournament that became a 2-day tournament. I caught 6 games in one day.
What a treat.
Yeah. My dad was putting ice packs on me, and I mean stuff that you'd see if it's 110 degrees, it was like 91 degrees out. But I
Yeah.
caught every game, and I was 12. I couldn't walk for like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I still remember it. Don't get me wrong. It was a great memory. But it is very common now for these showcase tournaments, um, boot camps, or whatever that will be one Friday, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday as the standard. And then if you have Monday off and then Tuesday or Wednesday and you do it again, when you add it up, you're playing more games than a pro team is. I
Right.
mean,
And it's not, this is the thing that gets me. The way they carve it up, you're still playing. You're still on the field. It doesn't matter if it's a 3 innings here or 4 there, whatever, man. It's still, you're playing 6 games in 3 days. You're still
and
out
you don't
for
have 20
the
pitchers on your pitching staff. You have your 8 to 10 pitchers or whatever it is.
right, right, yeah. And I don't mind if we and this is what we talk about in our summer workshop that we do here, how you manage summer ball. And this is a theme that threads the whole workshop together. Less done better is better than more done worse. So fewer games, go pitch well, pitch with focus and purpose. Go play with focus and purpose to win. If you're going to play 4 or 5 games on this weekend, great. Well, I guess what? You're not playing next weekend. You take the weekend off. Go fishing. Go play. What? Give it time to rest. I like to see where they're playing fewer games that have a culminating tournament at the end, where that makes sense to me.
Well,
But it's summer ball.
what you just described, now granted this at the high school level, is what they do in Japan with their national tournament. Their high school baseball tournament there is analogous what you'll follow with like the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournaments here. The problem becomes is it's the keeping up with the Jones phenomena.
Yep.
The parents, and they may not know any better, would say, well, if my kid's not trying to do X, he or she won't get looked at by the right scout. Or if they don't participate, the coach is not going to put in a good word to the scout or the college coaches that they know. Or if they don't participate, then they're not going to play on the team next year. Or it's a financial thing, quite honestly.
Yep.
So you're guaranteed X amount of games. You're guaranteed to have a radar gun on. All these other things where we're such a big country that there's so many different rules and regulations in different states. Even the high school rules are a little bit different, just a little bit different with the pitch counts and things like that between states. But then you go into summer season, longer if you're in the South or West Coast, and there is no consistency. It's the wild, wild west. I won't use any specific names of organizations or anything, but there's one organization may say we're doing it this way, and the pitch restrictions are this, and another organization may do it this way, and the cost is this versus that. It is not, once you get beyond the 11, 12-year-old in Little League baseball, it's wide open.
And it's also becoming a billion-dollar industry with no governance. And I'm not I don't think we need governance. What we're sitting here discussing, and this is kind of empowering the parents to say, okay, look, there's going to have to be a limit to this. We can only do so much, or little Johnny's going to get hurt. And enabling athletes, coaches that are truly into development, Because some of these summer programs, and again, I'm a fan of the current game jam thing. I'm not a super big fan of, but I'm a fan of, summer ball. But there can be a money grab kind of thing that goes on, and that's a little distasteful to me. But get these folks that are truly in it for the right reason, the right information to make correct assessments. And this is what we talk about. It's SOS. You're looking at the subjective, the objective, and the athlete survey. Subjective, what are the numbers? So, okay, let's say first weekend you put the radar gun on Dr. Z, and he throws 90 miles an hour. And in 3 weeks, he's throwing 88 miles an hour. Okay, well, now is he going down? Why is he going down? You know what I mean? Objective, we got to look and say, okay, you can't control your finish. You're laboring through your delivery. There's something wrong. We need to back up. And then the survey, hey, man, what's going on? Dude, my arm's killing me. And having these engagements instead of just being part of the machine. That's what I'm finding.
And it may not be anyone's fault too, because of the way the system's set up. Let's say you're on a successful high school team, you're one of the pitchers, and you guys get the state championship, so you may get to 30 games. Okay.
Right.
And maybe you pitch in 6 or 7 of them, something like that, and your coach uses you well. And then you go to a travel ball team. Well, the travel coach is going to say, like, I'm in charge of this team. I don't know anything about the other team. And let's say in the summer, they play 50 games, and you're one of their top 3 starters. Okay, well, how is he or she being used? Okay. Then you get to the fall, and you're expected to either participate in fall ball or a different travel league or something like that. So each coach actually managed things pretty well. So then fall back on the parent. Well, the parent's going to say, well, my son, my daughter's doing well. He loves baseball. We know that it's much better to be active than sit in your butt and play video games. So I'd rather have him or her play 100 games in a year, and they not be playing 100, but their teams are playing 100 games in a year. But you start doing that at age 12 or 13, or even just say your freshman year of high school, you've now played 400 games in high school. I mean, you're playing more than most leaguers.
Yeah, you're playing a minor league schedule before anything develops. And what we do is odd. What we do in sports is odd. We don't use our strength directly against our opponent. Like in football, there's push and pull. So we're using flexion and extension very, very directly. In baseball or in basketball, it's very, very similar that way. In baseball, what we're doing is we're using rotational movement to apply linear force when we're throwing. So we're using our muscles very, very differently. In fact, actually, correct me if I'm wrong, we're really relying more on the elastic component of our muscles more than we are on the actual flexion and extension of our muscles. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
It's really a combination. You're relying on the power from your lower extremities to then transfer that, whether you're hitter or pitcher or thrower. So that's where are your legs getting tired? Are your glutes getting tired? Do you have a tendonitis in your forearm that is going to protect your UCL, but now that your forearm hurts, it's not going to protect it as well. So It's a combination of really your force, your torque, your power, your pliability, which includes your elasticity. So you are correct, but a lot of it, you're not going to have that power when you have that cumulative overuse. And that's where some fans have been critical of workload management. The NBA, I think, has become a little bit more in the public eye.
Yep.
And some people I've read on different social media platforms are critical of how LeBron's been handled. Well, number one, you're not in the room with the Lakers athletic training staff, so you have no right to comment on that. And two, you have to understand what workload is. For a while, workload in baseball was equated to just pitch count.
Yeah.
And that is 100% inaccurate. Pitches are part of workload. Pitches do not equal workload. And that means your warm-up pitches, your live game pitches, how much you've run, if you are a pitcher and catcher, like especially some colleges, especially Division III, that happens a bunch. I know Texas A&M's the best player in the country right now going this year. I think Jace is what, first base pitcher, if I remember correctly, or is he just a first baseman? Last year with the Gators, with Jack, the same thing. So there, you have to be able to manage that, but you have to understand what workload is. And obviously that goes out the window when you're 12, 13, 14 with various baseball teams.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're right. They
Yeah.
play all the way through, and then they leach into the fall, which I don't find fall ball. I'm not a huge fan of fall ball. I don't see fall ball. Number one, there's no culminating event. It's there's some programs that run fall ball okay around here, but generally fall ball, I'm not a big fan of that. I'd like it shut down in summer ball. Let's
I,
close it.
I liked
Now
it in
going to a showcase
college.
is something different, but
Yeah. And I liked it in college because one, it got the freshmen acclimated.
yeah,
Two, in college, you're all together for the year. So you're building towards something. You want to kind of, the upperclassmen are kind of doing their thing in terms of building their bodies, recovering from injury, playing a couple games on the weekends here and there. And then really it's getting the freshmen acclimated. And that goes into winter conditioning, like weightlifting and strength and all that for at the college level. But at the high school level, I agree. It's kind of like, it's not my high school team. I'm not going for like a national championship or tournament at the end of July or August. I kind of was just out there. So I did it a little bit. I didn't
yeah,
have a ton of fun because I was like, what am I going for? I'd rather go with the cages. I'd rather take ground
yeah,
balls. I'd rather practice.
yeah.
But what am I going towards? Um, I do think, and this may be a little controversial, the fall season for baseball and softball can be used, can be developed differently, meaning, yeah, you can have some inter squads and things like that, but I don't think there needs to be weekend tournaments and classics and things like that because your body is starting to wind down. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean you're resting and sitting on the couch. You're winding down, and that's the time that if you're not playing another sport, you start building your body back up. You work on things that, oh, my glutes were kind of weak, or my back got sore because my abs were weak, or when I kept rotating, or when I would swing, my shoulder would, that's the time when you start working on some things to improve your body. Problem is that doesn't happen down here for sure. And up north, it happens, but not quite as much as it used to happen 30 years ago.
Yeah, and that's 100% right. And you'll see the guys going in and the fall. If you go watch a fall ball tournament after kids have played summer, it's you're really watching them labor through. And it's a this sounds terrible, but to your point, and I'll take the point. It's a purposeless tournament. It's a purposeless game. And it seems to, it's also incongruent with the school system. When you and I played in college, we'd go report, we get first day of classes, and we're going through drop ad, and there's congruency to that. And it makes sense where that summer ball, fall ball, summer ball, there, I agree. If we could cut that off and let's go work on the glutes. Let's get in the weight room. Let's start getting a little bigger, a little faster, or I'm going to have to play second base this year. So I got to start taking ground balls from the other side. And in the fall, that's when we really, in college, certainly where I coached and I played, that's when we're taking lots of ground balls. That's when we're taking lots of swings. That's when we're lifting and we're really trying to develop skill set. And then that, of course, shrinks to almost a pregame in the spring. Um, and we
Yep.
see here, especially, it really rolls into the fall. And when parents ask me, I am very specific. Cut it off. Just cut it off. Take a break. Take August off. Don't worry about it. If you need to go see Jamie Shoup at Florida A&M, or you're going to an on-campus tryout, I get that. Absolutely, go do that. But these continuation tournaments, I don't know. I don't like them. You
Yeah,
know?
I mean, I would say, Labor Day in the US, it'd be great if like Labor Day, because obviously if you're playing high school football or in every state but Florida soccer, you've already switched to that sport. But if you're not, you have like this culmination of like it's the end of baseball Labor Day weekend for amateur baseball. That would be a great idea. And
Yeah.
then if any of these bigger classics showcases want to do something, then you do it maybe in 1 or 2 or 3 weekends in September while the body is still in baseball shape. Baseball should be shut down October 1st.
Yeah. What's a
I mean, the
grind?
only baseball
Yeah.
still going is that even the minor league playoffs are done just
Yeah.
about by then, and it's really just the major league playoffs. And unless you're playing in the Arizona Fall League, or maybe I think there's one other fall league, professionally, you're done as well.
Well, if you go to winter ball or instructs or something like that, that's complete. That's a
But
whole
what I'm saying
conversation.
is
Right.
what percent, yeah, what percent of the pro guys of all the minor leaguers are doing that?
Oh,
Probably a
very,
smaller
very
percent.
small.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I mean.
Yeah. Very small. And those are the guys that we want another, that we're trying to move those guys up, usually, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
those are, double AAA guys or your top A ball guys. Yeah.
Right. And well, in that instructional, in that winter ball is a little bit different how they,
Yeah.
organize that anyway. Um, what we're seeing here, these velocity spots and these velocity gyms and places like that, help me with this. I'm gonna be as short-winded as possible. I just want to get your take as a former player on this. When we coached in the 90s and through the 2000s and working with pitchers, there's a delineation between a starter and a closer and mid-relief guys. Now, the mid-relief guys were lots of times, underclassmen developing, red shirts and guys like that. But we had mechanically a set of mechanics or rules, so to speak, that we would teach a starter. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. For the most part, there's two reasons why we have pitching mechanics: consistency, so you can throw strikes, you can repeat that delivery and throw strikes, and for a starter, safety. And one of the things we had with starters is some restrictive motions, so he's not throwing 100% of his physiology for 140 pitches, because a starter is expected to get to the fourth, fifth, sixth inning so we don't penetrate the bullpen. One of
Mhm.
them that we taught a lot. So if you're looking at me, if you're coaching me, right, and I'm on the open side. The open side is where my mitt is. The gather, the leg kick, we want the knee and the foot somewhere between the hips for a starter, somewhere in there.
Mhm.
Now, and I'm now getting to the point, the velocity gyms are teaching starters to over rotate and back sit on that hip. Exactly, back sit on the hip. That's what we would teach a closer to do. So it's like a governor on an engine. It's a little bit restrictive, so you're not really getting to that, that super high velocity thing. We also wanted our starters to finish in a controlled manner, and we just roll balls at them so they could feel it. So number one, they're defensible, and they can dissipate force, fanning essentially their delivery. Arm goes there, foot goes there. Well, with a closer, we didn't really care about that. We just wanted 3 more miles an hour and just downhill. And again, these velocity gyms, what I'm seeing is a lot of the closer mechanics are being taught to all pitchers. And we're starting to see now the starters' depth in the game go much shorter.
Yep.
How far am I off base with that?
I don't have the data to back that up, but I can say I think you're 100% accurate. I would just frame it a little differently. What I would say is everybody, or nearly everybody, is trying to throw 100%, 100% of the time. And the only way to do that is to kind of have the closer finish, if you want to use that way. I personally started to notice in the professional game, Cubs Indians World Series in 2016. Terry Francona brought in Andrew, what's his name, who actually pitched here in games, Andrew Miller,
Miller,
and
yeah.
started using relievers for 3 and 4 innings who weren't the closers.
Yeah.
That to me is when it started. And I think Francona might have been the first one. And I actually compliment him. I love him as a manager. He's awesome. We loved him in Boston. Um, but that's when he started saying, going, well, except for the Verlanders of the world, I'm not expecting at the major league level to throw more. If you can get into the sixth inning, you did your job. That's
Or right
unheard
now,
of
that's a
years
super
ago.
bonus.
Yeah. And again, except for a very few pitchers, if you can get 5 innings, 3 runs, you've done your job. That used to
Right.
be a below average start, and now that's considered an excellent start.
Right.
And I think part of that is because the expectation is, unless you're a knuckleballer, you need to be throwing above 95 at the major league level
Yep.
every single time and just empty the tank. Don't conserve anything.
Yeah.
Well, if that is going to be the philosophy, then one, there needs to be a reallocation of how do you set up your pitching staff, number one. Do you, this is a whole other discussion, but do you expand the numbers for a pitching staff? Do you get, instead of 12 pitchers, get 15 or whatever the case may be? But the problem is what filters down to the pro level, college, high school, and so on. Do you want your 14-year-old throwing 100%, 100% of the time with most likely crappy mechanics? No.
Right. That's kind of the
And
point. Right.
that's the challenge. The problem is, as you work your way up, if you have, and something we talked about at the very start of this, higher velocity, higher spin rate, more successful. And if you have poor accuracy, scouts say we can teach you that. Not a big
Right.
deal.
Right.
So if you can go out and throw 91 as a 15-year-old and you're emptying the tank and you have no control, but you can throw 91, you're probably gonna get a look someplace.
No, you're very marketable,
Yeah.
but again, at what cost?
So, and that's the problem is the way the system is set up. And again, because the surgical techniques are so good right now, if it is something that you tear, and the lay public knows a lot about the Tommy John surgery, but what if it's not that? What if it's continuous wear and tear of your rotator cuff or your labrum in your shoulder? What if it's continuous fraying of tissue and there's nothing surgical to fix? What if it's a stress fracture because you're using a weighted ball and you're 15 and throwing as hard as you can? The weak link is the growth plate.
Yeah.
I've read on this, published on this. There's data on this. If you have open growth plates, you should not be using a weighted ball.
Say that
Period.
again. Say it
If
one
you
more time.
have open growth plates,
Okay, so
yeah,
that
if you have
means
open growth
there's
plate
growth plates at the top and the bottom end of the humerus,
everywhere,
everywhere,
but particularly in the
along the
elbow
bone.
and the
Right.
shoulder,
And they're not
until as
ossified.
a
They're not hard bone. And that gives
yeah,
us
so
room
as
to
a
stretch.
as a male, correct. So a male is going to be about 2 years behind a female in terms of their skeletal maturity on average.
Yep.
So a 13-year-old girl is a 15-year-old boy. So just keep it like that.
Physiology
And
from a growth
you
perspective,
probably should
similar.
not start using a weighted ball program until you're at least 16, at least a junior in high school. And only then it should be a part of the program. It shouldn't be the major part of your pitching and training program. And we say this, whoever is going to be coaching you or is your sports performance coach or whomever should have some experience. It shouldn't just be grip and rip. Now, some people have access to really good sports scientists, athletic trainers, pitching coaches. Some don't. That's just a facet of our country is so big, and there's resources or varying levels at throughout the country, throughout the region. It just is what it is. But I think that is part of it. I have some data that shows this as well, where you throw faster, you have increased risk of pain, increased risk of injury. Now you use a device and a program that, quite honestly, if you follow it, will increase your velocity. So again, that's a successful program, but it comes with that risk.
Yep.
So it almost comes back to if the parents or caregivers or grandparents or whatever, and the athletes say, you know what, I'm willing to take that risk. Like, okay, I've done my job. I've given you all the information. Let's see what happens. And I
Right.
think that's what's really important. The problem is, do we just say, do we as physicians, do we as the medical staff say, you know what, as long as they're aware of it, we're going to let it roll because the kids might be more successful. And we know, particularly as you get up into the collegiate professional ranks, it's all about the wins, you know, which then allows the manager, the general manager, the scouts to stay in place. And if they don't, there's going to be turnover again because they need to be successful. Well, that's professional level. But what do high school kids do?
Right.
Emulate the pros.
Right.
So
And they
it's
do.
it's the system that, yeah, I mean, I can tell you there's a study that I'm leading right now that we're actually in the midst of it, and hopefully we'll start doing data collection by May. That is, look, these weighted ball programs aren't going back in the house, right? They're going to continue to be used. So is there a way that we can train pitchers to improve velocity more safely? And we're looking at something at UF using footballs. I remember growing up, I had the Nolan Ryan pitching Bible.
Yep.
I know Nolan Ryan hurt his elbow in 68 or 69. But other than that, I don't know if he ever had an injury. Now he had a big injury in 68 or 69, but he was a freak, but he was training in the 70s and 80s the way everyone else is doing it now. He just was ahead. He was two generations ahead of everybody. He
Yeah, and
was
if
doing
I
great.
correct me if I'm wrong, it was him and Dr. House got
Yep.
together at
Yep.
that
And
time.
Tom House is what he puts out there. Um, you always got to be really careful what's on the internet and the social media channels. But I do follow Dr. House. I think his social media channel is called Mustard. I think like mustard on a hot dog.
Right.
It's really good stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
anybody's
Yeah.
listening, I don't know Dr. House, but if you want to follow someone, he is someone that I would follow. Um, but Bill and Ryan always had a football, and you're like,
Yep.
oh, it's just in Texas. They played football. No, and if you look now, my last major league game I went to, I think was Minnesota Baltimore. I was at a conference in Baltimore last year. The starting pitch for Minnesota, football was next to his bag before he even got to the mound. So I started thinking, I'm like, we have all this idea that football is a heavier ball than a baseball. It just is.
Right.
But when you
Lower arm
throw it,
speed.
you have to almost throw a screwball if you want it, which completely takes off you can't really see on the screen. There you go.
That's okay.
Takes the stress off of the medial or ulnar part of the elbow because you don't turn your wrist in, you turn it away.
Right.
I'm like, well, if these programs are not going to go away, let's try something here. And myself and our colleagues, we put together an IRB and got all passed. And long story short is we've got about 10 to 12 pitchers and with one group of six, one group of six, looking at someone did a football throwing program for 6 weeks and did the throwers 10. And the other is just doing the throwers 10. They didn't pick up a baseball, they used the football. And they were checking their velocity, their kinematics, all the biomechanical type stuff, and
Now,
seeing did your
you have to explain what the thrower's 10 is.
Oh,
That's
I'm
a
sorry. So the throwers 10, I
stabilization
believe,
driven
was
workout.
developed, I think it was Kevin Wilk. And he has done a lot of his career. I think at the American Sports Medicine Institute in Birmingham, worked with Dr. Andrews. He's probably one of the more well-known physical therapists in this country, particularly for baseball.
Hmm.
And it's a series of exercises meant to maintain and or improve strength that is specific to a pitcher.
Right.
So your flexor forearm, so that yeah, this part of your
Yep.
forearm,
Yep.
your rotator cuff muscles, a few other things as well. And it's something that all you need is either a 2 to 3 pound little dumbbell or tubing. There's a lot of not to endorse it, but I know Mr. Jaeger, Jaeger bands, things like that, J bands. So everyone is doing that in the program, and then half of them are doing a football throwing program. So instead of throwing with a baseball
Right.
or a heavy baseball, they're just throwing with a football. And we kind of designed a program based on some data that came out like 30 years ago. And we're checking what your velocity is, making sure there's no injuries, and then we want to follow you throughout your high school season in 2025. It's a very small study. It's a pilot study, but if it works, and by works meaning no injuries or minimal injuries and velocity increases, maybe this is an opportunity to rethink going, okay, if we're going to do velocity programs, you got to do it with this. And it doesn't mean everyone's not going to get injured. There's going to be plenty of injuries. But that's
Yeah.
the type of thinking that I think we have to do as a sports scientist community, whether it's baseball, softball, soccer, football, American football, European football, whatever it is, of almost think outside the box. We can train people really well now. We can make people bigger, faster, stronger, throw faster, but we're just looking for those metrics. We have to make sure that we can make them healthy for their careers, their seasons, things like that.
Right. Right. Yeah. The durability and the
Correct.
longevity, so that they can play continuously, and
Yeah.
that's certainly what we look at. My groups, and that's all right. My groups are those high school, college, those guys, and we'll get some pro guys. I've got a couple of pro guys I work with, but after you really get them out of college, they become autonomous, which is what we look for as a coach.
Yeah.
I don't want an order taker. We have very different conversations with a pro guy. And it's really, I'm more of a tool in their toolbox than it is the other way around. But this study that you're talking about now you're engaged in this study now, correct?
Correct.
Through your throwing, what you do, your throwing program there? You're
Well,
throwing
no, no,
tournaments
it's part of a
every day?
study. It's a study we're doing right now. So obviously, we're in the middle of it right now. It should end in May when the high school season ends, and we see the athletes 3 times in November, actually right about now before the high school season starts, after they finish their throwing program, and then in May, once they finish their high school season. Um, so hopefully we'll be writing this up next fall and presenting it, whatever the data shows, maybe good data, maybe bad data. We don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, for the kind of the sports medicine conferences in 26, because these take like a year at a time.
Do you think maybe we can get a little sneak peek and maybe you
But no,
don't
I
have
don't even have the data right now.
to?
Uh, so I won't have the data at all. Part of that is to not confound it. Like I don't want to look
Sure.
in November to January to May, like how things are going. I
Yeah.
just get told like, oh, someone got hurt or someone didn't. Right now, there's no injuries at all. Um, but I won't even see the data until we start to analyze it, probably after Memorial Day.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll check back with you. I'll poke at you around there
Oh, that's
somewhere.
yeah.
Maybe.
And if this works, and if we have something, we'll see. Then obviously we're going to publish and all that fun stuff. And it's in
Yeah.
to give you a sneak peek, if you don't know, in medical publishing, it takes a long time to get through all the studies and stuff. But if we
Yeah.
can present it, and usually in sports medicine, there you get a little more play in like social media and the news because people are interested. It's, how often have you seen a new GI technique? Like you don't really see that in the news all that much.
Right.
But
Right.
when you hear about LeBron getting a special injection or Christian McCaffrey going to Europe for a PRP, it makes the news because the medicine permeates into the sports world.
Right.
So we'll
Right.
see if
Yeah.
it shows something. We'll see.
Well, it'll certainly be interesting. So you got one pool that's throwing footballs, and you got one pool that's doing the 10, and then you'll
Oh,
see
no, no,
kind
no.
of.
Both pools are doing the 10. Only one is throwing the football. So what we're hoping is this reinforces the importance of doing some off-season program. Throwers 10 was the easiest we could do because quite honestly, Dr. Wilk is amazing. And this is, you have to think of it as a kid that comes from a lot of resources or has no resources. What's
Yeah.
easy? All you need are bands.
Yep. Yep.
So, so that was the easiest thing to do. But then you split it into one group does the throwing, one doesn't, but everyone does the throwers 10.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So everybody's doing the 10, and then you've got one other group that's going to be doing the throwing the football in the
Using the
program that you
throwing
do.
program, correct.
Okay. That's going to be interesting. And this is Florida.
High school, they're all within about an hour radius of Gainesville or less.
Okay, because you got to go see them, or they've got to come in, or
They
you.
come to us. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
We started recruiting. We were fortunate to work with one particular large travel group in Gainesville. I won't say names or anything. We were fortunate to talk to a couple different well-known coaches, one of which his dad is a former major leaguer many, many years ago, who is not alive anymore, but is well known. So um, he liked the idea, so he has a lot of clout too in the area. So that's always a challenge with baseball players is making sure you're not disrupting their training routine.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the way I remember it is baseball training used to be, Jimmy Leland sitting on the bench with a cigarette. Like that was baseball training back in the day. It's
Right.
it's very much changed, but baseball players especially are very superstitious. Coaches have certain ways they want to do things. So it's always tricky when you have like this doctor come in and want to do stuff. Like we're not trying to change things, we're just trying to make them better.
And I have the same conversations with high school coaches like, look,
Yep.
I'm not competing against you, dude. We're going to work together. We're just trying
Yep.
to get everybody better. 100%. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's switch gears a little bit about because the podcast sort of soaring, and this is very rich material. This is wonderful, and thank you for sharing all this because it's super interesting. And the folks that really need this are starting to hear this, and maybe we'll help them sift through that soup of information on the internet. But let's also talk a little bit about what baseball gave you
Yep.
personally. You are a medical doctor. You played at Emory. You were a catcher. We've already talked about that. So, what things like discipline, self-starting, time, the grind of baseball, because baseball is very much a
Oh
grind.
yeah.
We're not a high impact sport like football. It's kind of a chess game. It's a little bit of a grind. Emory was super hard school. Was that something for you that was tough? How did you apply that in college?
So number one, yeah, you're completely accurate. Whether it's baseball or any other sport, I think number one, especially if you get to the high school years and then certainly beyond, You have to be really good at time management. It
Yeah.
forces you to be good at time management. If not, you're not going to pass your classes. And then if you're in high school, it means you won't graduate. And if you're in college, you're going to flunk out. So, number one is really important that someone is good at time management. And sports, especially, forces athletes to learn time management. Otherwise, they won't be successful. Number two, from a baseball perspective, and I also played soccer, so I would say it's a similar sort of sports because you have a lot of games unlike football, is that you have to work hard every day. It's not what did you do for me previously? It's did you have a good game yesterday? Awesome. I went 2 for 3 with a home run and a double. Sweet. Enjoy it for the night, maybe the next morning, maybe you get your name in the paper. Now I guess it's social media. And then you turn the page, you move on. Or I get home, I had a 3:30 or 4:30 p.m. game after school in high school, but I have a math test the next day. When I get home at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, I shower, maybe my mom ordered me a pizza or something, and I got to do my algebra homework,
Right.
that sort of thing. There's going to be times, especially in baseball, and you alluded to it, baseball, you fail a lot,
A
and it is
lot.
mentally a challenging sport, particularly as a hitter.
Yep.
That you might go 1 for 4 with a walk. You got on base twice, maybe you scored the winning run, but you only went 1 for 4 and you might have had 3 strikeouts.
Yeah.
You might have gone 3 for 4 with 3 home runs, but you struck out with the bases loaded and the tying run was on third base. Maybe you went 4 for 4, but you booted the ball playing second base and their winning run came across. I mean, it's a game of failure.
Yeah.
So it is important. Confidence is another thing. That's always been really challenging for me is you have to maintain confidence without being cocky. I've
Yep.
never been I think my friends and my colleagues say I'm not a cocky person. It's more the confidence thing.
Yeah.
And I've had people I've played with, they're like, oh my God, this guy is cocky. Oh
Right.
wow, this guy is really kind of like he walks into the room and you're just like, I just want to be next to you. Well, it's kind
Yeah.
of like that aura, and there's not a lot of those people, and it's a balancing act. It's also you're trying to fit the culture of a good culture of a team. Football is very different, where sometimes there's a lot of rah rah, a lot of energy. Baseball, there's not as much. I think there's more so at the college and high school level, certainly than pro, because you play so many games.
Yes.
But you have to stay sort of even keeled, but you also have to stay positive, which is really tough, especially as a young teenager. If you're hitting 270 when a good high school hitter is hitting above 350, 400.
Right.
Um, there's other things that come into play too, where, hey, so and so, the scout came and talked to Leo, but didn't talk to Jason, and you're going to get jealous.
Right.
Well, maybe they did notice you and they didn't talk to you. So there's a lot of things that go into it from the mental side in baseball. But yeah, absolutely. Time management, leadership. When you become that junior or senior, you may be a captain, you may not. I was a captain my senior in high school. I was a captain my senior in college. I did some things well, some things I probably wish I didn't do, or I didn't do as well as I could have. Some people are going to follow you, some people won't. I was more of a see what I do as opposed to like giving speeches and stuff. There's
Yep.
other people that are, the kind of the football captains, they give the speeches and the rah rah. That was never me.
Right.
But everybody does things differently, and when you're younger, you don't realize there's more than one way to do things. But again, it's learning to be committed to your team, to be trusting. Can I trust you to do the work on Sunday to come in Monday ready to go? Can I trust you to come in at 6 a.m. to school to do your math homework so that we can have a longer practice? In college, uh, I don't know how PC these workouts anymore, but the throw up workouts in November and December that they do in college, it wasn't about how fast you can run, is what are you going to give up?
Right.
So, we would have 5 a.m. workouts from after November 1st until just before finals in college, not in high school. And part of it was to start to get in shape. Part of it was an expectation that when you came back from winter break, if you're in college, you're off for 4 weeks. You
Right.
can't just send your butt. You have to
Right.
prepare. So, are you willing to do the work for your teammates, for yourself, for your coaches?
Yeah,
Um,
that's a less physical and more of an engagement test. And I'm never a big fan of those
oh,
workouts
I
and
didn't,
things
I
like
didn't
that.
like it.
And as a coach, I never really did that. And I'm not an over conditioning guy. I'm a purposeful condition. Now, don't get me wrong. If we need to run, oh, we're going to get our butts out and run. The
Yeah.
message
I
will
think a
be
lot
sent.
of those sort of things have changed over the years, shall we
Yeah,
say?
yeah, yeah,
I think it was different when you and I were in high school and college
yeah,
for various reasons. But the point of it is athletics and how it permeates into academics. You have to do time management. You have to have leadership. You have to have commitment. You have to put your trust sometimes in other people. You
yeah.
can't just try to do it all on your own. You're not playing an individual sport. You're not golf. You're not in tennis. You're not in dance. It's a team sport. And again, it applies to more than just baseball or softball. It could be, like I said, football, soccer, basketball, whatever. So I think a lot of that instilled in me the importance of working hard.
Yep,
I'm gonna fail.
yep.
If I fail, I can cry, I can swear, I can have a bad night. You wake up and you go back to work, or you go back to school, or you go back at it the next day. You can have a night to pout, and you
Yep.
go back to it.
Well, you mentioned that, and you just hit it again. So we're going to have those episodes. What you did yesterday, you were 4 for 4 with 2 home runs. Great. We got a game today. Or you were 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. Whatever, dude, we got a game today. So you've got that night to either commiserate or to beat yourself up or to celebrate. Then it's over. It's a very David Goggins-esque kind of thing. I don't care what you did yesterday. And baseball, being that low grade, low grind sport, really does teach that. And I bet that really helped, or it certainly helped you and I in college, but med school has got to be something similar, right?
Yeah, med school, any professional school that you do, but I can only speak for med school. Med school is a grind. Um,
Right.
you do 4 years of school in your first 2 years of med school, and then you start clinical rotations, like in the hospital. Um, it's a grind.
Yeah.
Um, and it is, you know, I will tell you, after I even graduated med school, my intern year, so my first year, um, you go into work every single day going, please don't let me screw up and hurt a patient or something like that. And there's so many, you don't realize it at the time. There are so many layers of people above you, the
Yeah.
junior resident, the senior resident, the fellow, the attending, the nurses. Um, but it's a grind. And I think for me, athletics, particularly at the collegiate level, kind of gave me that you've done tough stuff before. You can pass this test. Or if you fail the test, retake it and then you can pass it. Or
Right.
you've got your boards coming up. Okay, we have a 3-month plan of how we're going to do things to prepare for this.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Almost like a scouting report for the tournament.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Exactly right.
the whole thing about, oh, this person sat down and got perfect on their SATs or ACTs, that does not exist in med school. Everyone is smart. No, very few people who are younger understand this. You'll get this. There may be a Doogie Howser or somebody in your class in med
Yep.
school,
Yep. Yep.
but everybody is smart and everyone has to study. So it's one of those things like when you go from high school to college, now everyone is good. You get to med school and you may have been one of the smarter people in your class in undergrad or whatever that may be. That's not the case. Everybody is smart in med
Yeah.
school.
Well, it's interesting when, especially high school guys, because you're growing and developing a thing. And we talk to them about, okay, I want to play in college. So, okay, now wait a minute, buddy. Be careful what you wish for. It's not the same baseball as you're playing right now. It's different. And the level of everything that you have to do increases to a factor they're not familiar with. And look, everybody here's a stud. Everybody here's a dude. You may be
Yeah.
the best guy here, but everybody here's a dude. So I want to ask you this. There's two circles of competitiveness when we talk about competing. I'm competing against my peers in a manner that is constructive, but we want to compete in the cage. We want to compete. It's friendly, but there's something at stake. If I lose, I do 5 push-ups, or you're competing for a spot as a freshman, whatever that may be. And then we're competing against the teams that we're playing, different things. In medical school, going to achieve the level you've achieved, there's a lot of competition for those seats in those schools and those classes. Talk a little bit about the competitiveness that you learned athletically, and is it the same or different, or do you apply differently?
It depends. I never looked at it as competing against my classmates because if I got an 80 on a test, didn't matter what my classmates got. Now, some classes, some institutions, you may grade on a scale. You may say only 10 the top 10% get honors or whatever it is. But in the end, I don't know what they're going to get.
Yeah.
No one is stopping me except myself from getting a higher score. So I never looked at it as competing with other folks. Um, just like when you take your standardized tests, it's called the MCAT.
Yep.
You and I could study together. You're not preventing me from getting a higher or lower score. If you want to go out and get a perfect grade in the test and you can pick, you're going to go to Harvard or Yale or whatever, go for it.
Yeah.
And if I do the same thing, I'm still going to get a shot to go to the same schools. So it 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 was different. I mean, it's the same. You're competing, but I never looked at it as I'm competing against a classmate because you weren't actively stopping me, as opposed to in college, I may work out with some buddies like who can get the higher weights or things like that. But I knew that if it was me and two other catchers and we're all equal defensively, I had to get a couple more hits.
Right. Right. So it
Now
sounds
again,
like
they
to
and they
me.
aren't and they aren't stopping me, but I knew I had to do that as opposed to them.
Right. So what I'm hearing a parallel of the competition becomes much more intrinsic than
Yeah.
extrinsic. I now
Well,
have to
yeah.
compete with myself to become better to win the job or to get the grade or whatever. It comes
But
internalized.
yeah, I'm my own harshest critic. And
Okay.
that would almost been some of the things my coaches, my mentors have talked to me about is don't be as hard on yourself. But I'm harder on myself than I'm actually easier on other people, and I'm really hard on myself.
Yeah.
And now that I've gotten to the stage where I'm mentoring residents and fellows, I have to sometimes not be too hard on them. Like, come on, you got to document better. It's like a minor little thing. They did everything right and did one little thing. I'm like, guys, but when you're practicing independently, you're going to get audited or you're going to get dinged for this. So let's
Right.
not make those mistakes. So they're just like in sports, don't make the easy mistakes. Don't let a ball go through your legs. If someone beats you because they're a better hitter, so be it. But don't let a ball go through your legs.
Yeah. Very Tom Brady esque kind of thing. That he threw more 5 yard passes when he needed to
Oh
than I've
yeah.
ever seen anybody in my life. I'm just taking that, and just kind of
Oh
keep
yeah.
moving forward. That's actually great advice. Don't back up. Do the easy stuff, do the simple stuff, and just continue to grind. You mentioned a little bit about leadership. Um, you said that you led more in action than you did in words, which for me, that rings. That's the same kind of thing because this only counts so far. Then we got to kind of prove it.
Yeah.
Dive into that a little bit. When you were a leader and when you were trusted to be a leader, number one, what did that mean for you? Did it change how you practiced, how you played? And then give me a little bit on what you did.
I mean, for me, it was I wanted to be the first one into the locker room to change for the batting cages. I wanted to be, the last one out. I wanted to be the one that was, in the gym. Maybe I didn't work out for 4 hours. I'd work out for half an hour, but I'd do something every day, and folks would see that. I didn't have to say anything. I was just there. That is kind of permeated with, for example, with my work now. I'm usually the first one into the building because I'm working on stuff myself. If extra work needs to be done, I'm not going to say, okay, have one of the, folks that work with me do it. I'll just do it myself. Like, why am I going to scut out somebody, a resident or a fellow or a student? If it's something you can do, just do it. And I don't care if you are the captain or you're a freshman, if you're the chair of the department, if you're a brand new attending, if you're the head coach or you're the student volunteer coach, pick up the towel. I mean, that was something. I'll give you a great example. When I was in Paris last summer for the Olympics, I was one of their team docs. Is the chief medical officer? He would fill ice bags, he'd pick up towels, he'd clean the table just like everybody else, and he didn't have to say anything. But when he did that, everyone else noticed it.
Yeah.
So if we needed to, on the days I got in early for that particular clinic, I would help folks if we need to change the towels. I'm not going to have the massage therapist do it because they're the one to use it. If it was my turn or if it was my colleague Ben or somebody else, scoop up the towels, count how many there were. You basically walked it down the street to where the towel exchange was, and do it myself.
Right, right. Well, it needed to be done. Just flip and do it, right?
Like, just because you're a senior now versus a freshman doesn't mean that you don't have to do those roles.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're not better or worse than anybody else.
Right, right. And it kind of rings to me, and I get a lot of heat for this. I have a pet peeve. One of my pet peeves is a lone baseball sitting on the field. Cool. Doc, it infuriates me because I've seen guys back up, when they're long toss and step on it and roll an ankle.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are you doing? Pick the bait. So I'll go pick it up and I'll nudge somebody. God dog, that kind of thing. But
And if there are certain responsibilities, like we always at Emory, at least we used to have like the freshman pitchers during band practice, their responsibility is grab the bag behind the second base screen and bring it into the pitching coach or the batting coach or whatever.
right.
Okay, there's certain responsibilities, but everyone's helping pick up balls. But if it's you walk in the locker room, there's stuff on the floor. Okay, pick it
Oh,
up. You know what I mean? That sort of thing.
that lack of attention to detail for me is infuriating, and it's one of those things that, and it's hard to explain to a younger person. They all matter. So they have this big misconception, and I did too when I was 14. It's like, well, I'll get to it, not a problem. It's not a big deal. I can, no. The way you act and the what you do from the time that you wake up and the time that you go to bed, all of it matters on the field. Are you going to
Or
class? Are
the
you
other
there
thing
early?
is I can't remember who said this or who it was, my dad or somebody else, is what do you do when someone's not looking?
Yeah, the
Don't do it
definition of
if you're
integrity.
at the level like you have cameras or you have social media. Don't put on social media, hey guys, I got up and did my workout. Okay, if you want to do that, like I'm not going to judge you. Like okay, whatever.
Right.
What are you doing when folks aren't looking?
Right, and interesting. And Emory is a tough program. Now, it's a really generally a tough program. Academics are very rigorous, and the coaching staff that I knew back then, they're pretty
Yeah,
tough
I
guys.
had Coach Howard, and he left right after I graduated. So Coach
Yeah,
Twardarski came in, who I heard, and I know him, was amazing. He just retired after 25 years at
yeah, yeah,
Emory, I think,
yeah.
and amazing. I think his longtime assistant Bobby Perez is now the head coach.
Right.
But no, he was a player's coach from what I heard, but he also was hard on you. Like you do things the right way. He's a good guy, but you got to do things the right way.
Well, and that's the employability thing that we learn so well through sports, where it's like, look, the rules are really easy. It's kind of left and right. You do good, you get pats on the hiney, and everything's great. You do bad, I'm not ignoring it. We're immediately taking action, and we're going to talk. Now, the degree that is necessary is the degree
Sure.
that's necessary, but that immediate feedback, both on both sides, the immediate feedback is critical. The thing too, and this gets where we're talking about the employability, the over personalization. When we play sports long enough, we learn that emotional maturity has to develop very quickly, because you're going to get your butt chewed, even
Oh
when you
yeah.
did things right, because that's just
Oh,
the way it is.
I've screwed up too, and I've had my butt chewed out plenty of times by my coaches at Emory, especially my younger years, freshman, sophomore year, when I didn't think I did anything wrong, or maybe the way I handled when someone
Mm-hmm.
got at me when I didn't think I did something. Certainly in high school and younger, or my dad would chew me out. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's the right way to handle things from the coaching side, but I also think from the player side, it's not going to be hunky dory all the time either.
No, the feedback though is important, and
Yeah.
that helps to build the resiliency. And we see, and there's a little bit of a theme sometimes where you just kind of ignore it and go on, ignore it, go. Well, if you don't address the behavior won't change. So you have to give some directions. Now, I agree with you. The degree in which, because you and I grew up in a time where I had some coaches that were pretty rough
Yeah.
and completely unnecessary and really
It wouldn't
were
fly today.
abusive. I would say abusive is the best word for it.
Yeah.
But there's a blend of both, so that immediate feedback, especially in sports, we're able to get that and get that across. So and that builds the resiliency. And I'm sure the resiliency that you use to get through med school and do what you do has been honed through
Well,
25
it's really
years.
funny if you work in sports medicine. It kind of is people's personalities in medicine can kind of gear towards certain things like the health nut, it's usually the cardiologist. Um, the smartest person in the hospital is the nephrologist or the kidney doctor. Um, the
Right.
intellectualist might be the neurologist. Interestingly, either orthopedic surgery or your sports medicine doctors, your ortho sports and your non-operative sports, such as myself, a lot of us were athletes. So we've kind of used this, but we have a also an appreciation and love of medicine and treating athletes and non-athletes alike for musculoskeletal related reasons. Um, and a lot of us have been through that. One of my orthopedic partners, he played baseball at Duke. One of the other orthopedic partners, he played collegiate soccer. One of my co PM&R sports doctors, she's does U.S. soccer with me. One of my two former colleagues, each played at least a year of collegiate football. So there's a lot of overlap. If you're seeing a quote unquote sports medicine doctor, whether they're surgeon, non-surgeon, they probably have some interest in sports because they probably played it. So we kind of know
Right.
this stuff. We've been through it. We got injured. So,
And that's a wonderful area to speak from because you know what it feels like.
oh
And
yeah,
that's super important, because in baseball, certainly, we can't see ourselves swing. We can't really see ourselves pitch. So we're relying on that, again, proprioception, but that sensation of what's right, what's wrong, that's too fast, that's too slow. And you only get that by doing it. And from your position, and the colleagues that you talked about, that would be invaluable information to be able to connect with an athlete and a family.
yeah, yeah,
Oh my
for
goodness.
sure.
Well, I've taken up a great deal of your time. Let's tie it up right here with a couple of takeaways. Sound good?
Yeah.
In your opinion, with what we've all talked about here in the giant realm of sports and baseball in particular, what's the number one thing? Like if you had a magic wand and you said, okay, this is the thing I would change, what would it be?
Uh, for anything in the sport of baseball or at the adolescent, pro, or anything.
Let's say anything, and then we'll do one of the groups.
Adolescent baseball should stop October 1st of each year, at least
Okay.
in the United States.
So the year round, going all the way through November, December, and then January back in, adolescent baseball needs to stop. You would bippity boppity boop, October 1st, done.
Yeah, because the way I think of it is I don't want somebody to stop training. If
Right.
somebody wants to go to the cages or play catch with their parents or their buddies, go do that. If you want to do another sport, yeah, it's probably going to run into, football in the fall, but you can still do a winter sport.
Yep.
Um, it'll probably give you some rest. It'll give some kids the appreciation of other sports, or if you rest from baseball and you truly love it, you're going to come back to it, which is
Yeah.
a big thing, pre middle school. And it's going to give you the opportunity, quite honestly, to build your bodies in October, November, December. And if you are up north, you get a couple more months. If you're in Florida, Southern Cal, Texas, Southern Louisiana, you start up in January. So
Right.
I would say if there's one thing, I'd probably say, high school ball and under stops October 1st.
Right. Give you a break, get away from it, do other stuff,
Yep.
rest, recuperate, whatever that may be.
Yep.
I think that's great advice. Now, what would be one thing you would change about baseball in general, like maybe at the college or the pro level, or anything there to kind of be addressed or looked at? I mean, we talked a little bit how the game has changed, the structure of the game has changed, which for
You
me,
know what
I
I'd be
love it.
curious about? Um, I don't know if I change, it's really hard because, everyone is training really well, collegiate and above. And I think if we limit the number of injuries before you come out of high school, that'll limit the injuries 5 and 10 years from now in college and pros. But one thing I've always been curious about, and I've gotten shot down tons of times, if you think about it, the rates, not the volume, because there's more in professional baseball, but the rate of injuries in baseball pitchers in college, I believe, is lower than professional. The other
Okay.
thing to note is in collegiate baseball, particularly Division One, you pitch on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and you throw your freshmen or sophomores in your midweek games.
Yep.
In Japan, at the Nippon League, they do 6-man rotations. Why is Major League Baseball, if you're going to continue to increase velocity, push velocity, and your workload, you're emptying the tank with every pitch, why not go to six-man rotations? I know there's a financial component. I know there's less starts. I know there's the agents. But if I could do something that I'd be curious that wouldn't really have an impact on the game itself, but might improve the health and well-being of pitchers with where velocity is going, I would be really curious to see how six-man rotations work in professional baseball.
Just to give that extra day of rest, recuperation, building, whatever
And that's
that
what they
is.
do at Division One, most Division One, except when you get into the playoffs. That's what they do in Japan. I would be curious.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I never really thought about that because you're just entrenched with kind of what you know.
Yeah.
What should coaches? Now, these are going to be the younger side. These are going to be the kids going to college, the high school kids,
Yeah.
middle school kids. Coaches, parents, and young pitchers. What should they be doing? What should they be avoiding? Kind of like one major thing or several things. What do you
I
think they
think they
should
need
be
to
doing or not?
stop um, competitive baseball by October 1st
Right?
and and if they're not playing another sport, like if you're not playing soccer, you're not a swimmer, diver, gymnastics, whatever, there should be a dedicated off-season training program
This is
to
what they
build
should
your
be doing.
body, not your
Yeah.
arm speed or not ball speed, but building your body. Take if you play till October 1st, give you October off, November, December, January, you build your body up. If you're in Florida, you start your throwing program January 1st. If you're up north, you can start in February or March.
Yep.
Building your body, but don't play competitive baseball past October 1st. The other thing I might suggest, and some coaches do a great job, some don't, is it's really hard, but coaches from high school to Legion to travel ball need to all be talking to each other. And it's hard because there's private organizations and there's the high school associations. Um, because it would be nice to know if Johnny played 40 games already, if Johnny pitched 67 innings already. And some coaches may know that. Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. But we're such a big country and if it's
Yeah.
hard to manage your athlete if you don't know what your athlete is doing. I'll give you an example. For U.S. soccer, some of the ladies um, have already started to play collegiately. So obviously, if something's going on, they're going to call UNC or Penn State or Duke or whatever team they're on to keep them informed,
Right.
right? Or, and Penn State or UNC or Duke or Florida State or Stanford, whatever, will let US soccer know, hey, Coach Leo hurt her ankle. Going to be fine. I'm just giving you a heads up.
Yep.
They're not isolated in silos. And that's how it's done at the upper levels. I think because the numbers are so great at high school and below, I think that's the challenge.
Well, there are several reasons, and it's a very territorial and
Oh, yeah.
polarized thing. And now this is weird. I was in Tallahassee a long time, okay, and I grew up here in the beaches area, all right, in St. Petersburg, and it's very much not that way in Tallahassee. That very small town. You get this guy that coaches at this high school, then he'll go to this high school, and they all work together in the summer, and it's really very collegial there, which is why they produce guys like Andy Bajowski. They produce Tucker Barr. David Ross was a guy that,
Yep.
Palmer, all those guys. And they really do a good job. Here, it's extremely polarized, which is one of the reasons why we're doing this workshop.
And
I
I
couldn't
can't,
agree with you more.
yeah, I can't, I don't want to speak on anyone's behalf, but there are at least three major travel ball programs in the greater Gainesville, Alachua County area. Um, and then you add in some of the other stuff, and I think they're all pretty competitive. Let's put it that way.
Yep. Yep.
And this is a college-sized town county. We're not talking Orlando, Tampa,
Right.
Miami, Atlanta. Atlanta is a hotbed for ball players. So I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's the challenge.
Yeah. No. So for the takeaway for the coaches, the parents, and
Communicate, just like anything in
get
sports,
together
communication is
on it.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get together on it. I couldn't agree more. That's awesome. Biggest red flag from a parent perspective that you see, or an athlete perspective, or a coach, or something like that. So, what do you think you could give a what's a warning sign? What's a something like, we've talked
Well,
about the med
I
balls
guess
and
it
everything.
depends on what area. For as a sports medicine physician, it's when I might get a kid that shows up in my clinic. I'm like, oh, you play for this high school or this travel ball. Did you tell your athletic trainer? We didn't want to tell them because coach said we can't talk to them. That then you start hearing going, wait a second, like I'm happy to treat you, but I now need to report this to the athletic trainer with permission by the parent. And then the athletic trainer is now stuck and you've heard about these sometimes at the collegiate and pro levels where if athletes are being told by coaches not to go to the AT, and then
Ooh,
eventually not to the doctor for whatever reason, you don't have trust there. And again, I'm very respect. I played baseball in college, but I'm not the pitching coach. I'm not the manager. The coach does that.
right.
But in the same way that I'm respectful of that, I would expect the coach to let the athletic trainer do his or her job and the doctor do his or her job. We can all communicate as long as the parent allows it and things like that. If anyone's under 18 and over 18, as long as the athlete allows it. But that's sometimes a little bit of a concern because now you've got trust issues. If
Yeah.
the coach is not comfortable letting their own staff do their job, that's a little bit of a concern.
Yeah.
And again, if the coach is like, hey, your elbow's hurting you, go talk to the AT and Dr. Z. Or you need to go talk to, the athletic trainer and you've had surgery with Dr. Farmer. Let's get you back in with Dr. Farmer because then you build more trust. Yeah, your athletes want to like, are you hurt? Are you injured? There's a little bit of that, like especially at the younger ages. Are you just a little sore? We can play through that.
Right.
But you never want to be hiding anything. And that permeates trust in everything. So if I'm hearing that an athlete or more athletes are getting hurt and the athletic trainer isn't aware of it, that's
That's a
a
red
red
flag.
flag right there.
Yeah, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
100%. I agree completely. That's great. Well, Dr. Z, dude, I appreciate your time, brother, and I hope I can keep poking at you a little bit. And I'll,
Oh,
I'll, I'll
absolutely. This was
definitely
awesome.
poke at you in the fall to see if we can get a little sneak peek on that study.
Yeah,
That would be,
sure.
if that unveils a little bit,
Hopefully
it's
it'll
worth
show
it.
something. Research is really hard. But and I'm fortunate to have a lot of good folks I get to work with. But hopefully, everyone continues, no one falls off. And we'll see if we got something in May.
That's going to be cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, again, I really appreciate your time, and we'll certainly be in touch. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
My pleasure. Have a good one.